Hey everybody, welcome to Ellis Mowers. I appreciate y'all watching the channel as always. Wanted to make a video dedicated to this. I have a mower that has come in for repair. It's a Yard Machines rider, newer Yard Machines from 2015. It's got a situation where you press the brake in, you have a good battery, you turn the key and nothing happens. So we're going to do a tutorial on everything that I do to troubleshoot when a mower comes in with this situation. And then we're going to figure out how we can fix it. Alright, we'll go ahead and dive into this one. Pretty much a generic MTD rider. You see I've got 3 of them sitting right here. They're a dime a dozen, and they're all basically the same. And this troubleshooting can go for really any rider out there. Garden tractor, lawn tractor, especially the simpler stuff. It's pretty much just following the wiring and having a multimeter with an ohm setting in order to test out some stuff, as well as volts. So let's go ahead and get started. If you have any questions about this video, reach out to me, Ellis at ellismowers.com, or at ellismowers09 on Instagram and Facebook. I'll catch you up on what I've already done off camera, and then we're going to start doing some testing on camera. So let's go ahead and get started. So, quick overview of the mower. It is an MTD Yard Machines. It's got the Power More engine on it. Doesn't really matter what. For troubleshooting like this, it doesn't necessarily matter what engine it's got on it. What I've done so far, I checked the fuse. The fuse looks good. You can test the fuse by, if I can do this with one hand, turning it to ohm setting and putting it on each end here. You can put it on the top as well. But if I can get it in there, you want it to be 0 ohms, which is exactly what we have there. So the fuse is good. I put one in there just in case, because sometimes they look good and test good and still may be bad. Battery, I have done the same thing. It had 2 volts in it, and that told me that it's possible that this thing has a current draw. Also, because the battery that was in it was brand new, so that means something sucked it down to 2 volts. Starting a mower would only get it, and it not starting would only get it to about 12, and then it wouldn't have enough power to turn the starter. So something's draining it. So I've got a battery here that is about 12.66 volts. It's already lost 0.04 volts, 0.04 of a volt, since we've started this troubleshooting process and I hooked it up, which means I've got a current draw somewhere. So what I'm going to do is take the battery out. We're going to test to make sure. I'm suspecting it's a bad starter solenoid that is shorted out on the inside and is drawing the battery. Or it's either a starter solenoid that's not grounded properly. One of the two. I'm pretty sure. Stay tuned to see if I'm right. We're going to take the... Oops. But here's the thing. When I touch it, it's giving me a current draw when I touch it, especially if I leave it off for a few seconds and put it back. You can feel a spark, and you're not supposed to feel any of that. The ignition switch is off. You make sure the ignition switch is off. I know the ignition switch is working because when I turn the ignition switch to the on position, you can hear the anti-backfire solenoid click under the carburetor if you listen closely enough. And I've got a little spark coming off whenever I did that right there. So I got something going on. It's like something's not grounded. So I'm thinking that I have a starter solenoid issue in some aspect. So let's take the battery out. And now what I would like to do, you take the battery out. There's 2 things in here you can pull out as well. For the battery tray. That pretty much gives us full and complete access to the starter solenoid. The lighting may not be good, but let's go inspect it together, okay? So let's look back in here. So your starter solenoid, it lives right there. And it's a, is that a 4-post? That's a 4-post solenoid. And the one thing I want to check, I'm gonna pull off the wires for the 4 that are clipped into the post there, if I can get them out. One of them is a ground wire, and one of them should be an orange wire. So to make sure the starter solenoid is good, so you have 2 green wires here and an orange wire. So to see if we are getting a closed loop circuit to the starter solenoid so that it will allow the engine to crank, we're going to put a lead on this orange wire right here. Then we're going to go over to the front of the ignition switch, and we're going to locate the orange wire on the ignition switch. So you could pull the wires off the switch. That ain't nothing doing, especially since the battery's disconnected. Your orange wire is on the bottom. So the bottom terminal here, we're going to stick one lead of the ohm meter in, and then the other lead we're going to stick into that orange wire that I showed you right there. Let me do that. Let me show you what I do to test out to make sure that the circuit is closed so that it would allow the starter solenoid to fire to allow the mower to start. The seat safety switch is not a part of any of this. A lot of people get that mixed up. A lot of people say, oh, my mower, you turn the key, it doesn't do anything. And people say seat safety. No. Most mowers, I'm not going to say all mowers, most riders, like regular lawn tractors like this, the seat safety is on a separate loop than the starting loop, if that makes any sense. Brake safety, blade safety are the only 2 safeties that need to be closed in order for your mower to start on one of these lawn tractors in particular. I'm pretty sure Craftsman's are the same way too, and lower level John Deere's, if I remember right. Alright, so this is actually interesting. We might have a bad safety switch here, or a safety switch that isn't closed, one of the 2. So I've got my lead into this orange wire on the back side of the mower here, and I've got the other lead on the back side. The orange wires come up through here, and then you've got your orange and white that hooks into the ground, or one of the terminals on the starter solenoid, and I'm not getting any ohms even when I push the brake safety down and all that stuff. Now the blade safety sometimes will mess up and not allow the switch to close, so I may have an issue with maybe a bad wire potentially. I'm not sure, but I'm going to do some more troubleshooting. Usually when you attach the orange wire from the starter solenoid on these MTDs to the orange wire, make sure I'm not wiggling anything around here. Sometimes you got to make sure your connections are good. So the orange wire of the starter solenoid to the orange wire on the switch, which is exactly what I've got. I'll wiggle it around to make sure that I've got a good connection. I do. So I'm going to take them both off and make sure I touch the terminals together to make sure I have 0. I do. So I've got something going on with a safety switch, potentially. I'm not exactly sure. We're going to look and see, is that switch down? So your blade safety switch is right here on the back side. And there's something not right about it, actually. So there's something not right about it down there. Something's bent out, because, and this, I can't show it to y'all because it's all encapsulated. Let me see if I can get y'all down there at least to somewhat see it. So this arm right here moves, and you see that gray looking switch back here somewhere. It's down here. Ugh. It's down here, and that, when you pull the blade arm back, it's supposed to attach to that blade safety switch, which will allow you to start the mower. So that's one of our issues. Another one of our issues is that we've got a parasitic drain coming from somewhere. So part of me is thinking that we've got either a ground wire that was not put back correctly, because seeing that means that somebody's been in here doing something. And sometimes that's not a good thing. So I'm going to see if I can bend that back into place and work on it, see what I end up with. So number one, we just did the test either way. Orange wire to orange wire on the switch, orange wire to the solenoid. Made sure all of our switches were closed and had no continuity, which means that we had an open switch or a bad switch, or a switch that wasn't making contact. And we found a switch that's not making contact. So let me remedy that situation. I'll be back with you, and we'll continue to further troubleshoot this and hopefully find whatever parasitic draw it's got too. So in case you encounter this actually kind of rather odd problem for this, you're going to take off that bolt right there to take off the engagement cable, and then there's two bolts right here on the side to take off the actual arm itself, and I'm going to take that off and bend it back into place so that to put it back where it needs to be. And then we're going to figure out, see if it cranks and runs and all that good stuff, and then we'll figure out if we still have a parasitic draw on the battery, which is basically just going to be making it sit for a little while to see if the battery drains out of it again. I have a feeling that we probably will, and it may be a starter solenoid issue, or we've got an issue with wiring up here somewhere. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let me take that arm off, and then we will continue on. We are going to skip ahead a little bit here because my camera died. However, I have the battery back in place. What I needed to do, I got that blade safety bent back in place. Didn't film it because, number one, it ended up in a busted thumb, and it ended up in a busted switch. So I will leave y'all to your own devices to figure out how to get that properly. Now I've got the battery reconnected. When I tested, remember the ohm meter I had in the last clip, the orange wire on the ignition switch wiring and the orange wire that was on the starter solenoid, when I closed that switch and pulled that lever back, it was 0 ohms, and when I had the parking brake down. So that's what you're looking for. Anything else, the mower's not going to start if it's wired correctly. Now I have the battery back in, and I'm going to see if I have any issues with it shorting out again. And it seems like it's better, so that's good. Like I said, I'm not completely sure. If I turn the switch on, I can hear it. Turn it off. You hear it once as it's recoiling. I'm not sure about. I think the only thing I can do is just let it sit overnight and see if it drains this battery back. So I'm going to hook this battery up. I'll show you that it starts up and everything. We'll let it sit overnight and see what happens, I guess. Alright, so battery wise, let's take a voltage check. If y'all can see that or not. So we're at 12.96. I already have had it running. Newsflash. Sorry, but so what you want to see, like I said, you want 0 ohms on that multimeter. set it to like 20K, 20,000 ohms or something along those lines. The two orange wires at the solenoid and the switch, if you have the parking brake down and the blade is off, those switches should be closed and it should allow you to crank it. So here we go. And it is charging the battery too, I'll show you. So 13 volts. So that's good. So basically we just diagnosed everything. Now we're going to see if we can find a parasitic drain, which basically means I'm just going to let this thing sit overnight with the battery connected and come back to it in the morning or the next day and see how much of the battery has been drained. I suspect, since the starter solenoid works properly, these power mowers, it looks like, have an internal voltage regulator as opposed to like a diode setup for a Briggs. So you're probably looking at a voltage regulator, which is right here, it looks like. Oh, that may be an ignition module. It may be all in one. And honestly, I'd probably tell them just to disconnect the battery after each use, because they're already pushing. After I do that, they'll be pushing like almost $250 to $300 just to fix this. And then after that, they've got a deck belt and all that good stuff, but I need to properly diagnose it. Hopefully I don't have to do that. I'm going to let it sit and we'll see what happens. Alright folks, I got it. Let it sit for about, I don't know, two hours or so. And if it was having a parasitic draw, the batteries wouldn't have 12.6. Well, if you go that way, it's like 12.7 volts in it. So the static charge of this battery was like 12.65. So it has stayed steady and it's good. So I'm gonna call this one good. I don't know what caused the battery to drain as quickly as it did. The only thing I can think of is that they left the ignition switch on when it didn't crank originally. So let's wrap this video up. So that's it for this video. I just wanted to do my best to show y'all basic troubleshooting processes. My starter solenoid guess was wrong. So what we ended up doing is we made sure that we had a good battery and tried to crank it over. And then when that didn't work, we went ahead and went on the troubleshooting aspect of seeing if all the safety switches were closed, which was the orange wire deal from the ignition switch to the starter solenoid pole. They should almost always be the same color, unless there's some sort of safety switch shenanigans going on. Some of the higher end mowers are like that. But we didn't find continuity when we had the blades off and the parking brake down. So that means we had a switch issue. Well, I looked under there, found the switch going to the blade switch was bent all out for some reason. I don't know why, I don't know how, but that was a pain to get back in. And trust me, y'all didn't miss anything with me not filming it, because it definitely wasn't the best way, but we got it fixed. When we got the blade engage lever back where we needed it to be, it closed that switch and gave us continuity. So we had 0 ohms between the ignition switch, and we had it between the ignition switch and the starter solenoid pole, that orange wire on this. And as soon as we did that, we cranked it over, it started right up for us. I figured out the parasitic drain on it, that there was none, and because it sat here for a couple hours and it has not sucked any charge out of the battery, or the battery is just getting back down to its static charge of like 12.65 or so. If it was, if it had a parasitic drain, it would have drained the battery more than it is. I will double, triple check tomorrow when I get home, but I'm pretty sure we got it all fixed up. Don't know how that blade switch or the blade lever got pulled out so far that it was off the switch, but that was definitely the issue. An easy fix, in theory, the way that the mower and everything, you have to access it, fairly difficult. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Hopefully y'all are have a better shot at troubleshooting things. And if you have any questions about this one, reach out to me, Ellis at ellismowers.com, or at ellismowers09 on Instagram and Facebook. And I will catch y'all in the next video. See you then.